Hello, welcome to the Crate and Crowbar. It is Thursday, the 30th of April. It is episode 321, and I am Alex Wiltshire. And with me tonight are Grey Watcher of the Eastern Wall, Graham Smith,
Hello, happy to be back.
and Ludomancer extraordinaire, Tom Francis.
Hello, thank you.
Hey, so big news for Assassins this evening. We've got a new Assassin's Creed coming.
Yeah, they announced this by live streaming somebody drawing the key art for it, which is kind of cool actually. Like that's a interesting way to reveal. I have to wonder, like, was that really like they're drawing the actual key art and it was live? Is that right? Like, or was it pre-recorded?
Yeah.
I thought it was pre-recorded.
Oh, well, it didn't need to be live, didn't it? Unless they were sort of chatting on the.
I don't think
stream
there
or
was any
something.
audience interaction or anything like that. If it was live, then fucking hell, that was bold, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's like as an artist, I don't know what it's like, but you know, I'm sure streaming itself is a little bit nerve-wracking, and then streaming like this is what you're drawing is as you're drawing it. It's like a Rolf Harris kind of thing. Like, can you tell what it is yet? Can you tell what period it is yet?
I like the way that it kind of made dramatic the sort of the very nature of drawing. Like, oh, we're just going to leave the most emblematic things until last. Whereas usually I'd imagine that you'd probably, I mean, obviously you'd want the background in early, but you'd probably put a lot more focus on the foreground stuff if you were just drawing normally.
He did spend like 4 hours just tinkering with the grass and nothing but the grass.
That's all I saw.
40,000 people watched the stream screaming at it to do something else.
Looking back, like, so when I looked at it, there was a very kind of sort of medievally sort of a castle, very extraordinarily sort of I don't know, 13th or 14th century classic sort of high walled castle. But this is not that era. We were having a conversation. The gang, the Crate Gang, as we call ourselves, about. I've started that now. That's happening now.
Can't believe I missed another meeting.
About the kind of historical era that it's meant to be, because things seem to be from the trailer a little bit. And around it. We've all seen the trailer, right?
No, actually,
it's not.
No, I haven't. I didn't have the chance.
Hey, maybe we should do a live. Maybe we could watch it.
I do have it open
now
here.
On individual screens. Really?
What a coincidence!
I like that Alex is trying to maintain the ruse that we didn't.
I know.
I
thought I was doing so well there.
I don't know why.
Oh.
I was like, I can't believe you've forgotten that Graham just told us he hasn't watched it.
Well, shall we spontaneously all watch it together at the same time, and we can talk about it?
I haven't thought this through at all, but my gut says yes.
Okay, I'm hitting play now.
No.
Okay, I went slightly early. So a English voiceover, bigging up how awful the Vikings are, we assume from context, saying they're heartless, godless.
Exactly. Yeah, this is all. It's feeling like it's setting up a load of stuff, only to throw them all to the ground in a minute, doesn't it? Have you seen the Vikings TV show?
No, I haven't.
Because I think that is the. It feels very much the watchword for this.
What it's doing is for the listeners, is a clever juxtaposition of a voiceover condemning the Vikings while we see the Vikings doing things that almost look like what they're being accused of, but then actually turn out to be innocent and fine.
However, the English are most definitely absolutely evil.
Man, wax seals were cool.
He's written helpfully on that piece of scroll the word war.
That's the whole scroll. It's just the word war and the biggest font you can write.
It's the one Saxon word that we've inherited.
I know a teenager who makes his own wax seals in 2020.
Oh wow!
A teenager,
which is obviously like the most hipster thing I can think of.
My main takeaway from this trailer was I wish we brought wax seals back. I wish like we had to sign emails with wax seals somehow. You could 3D print my wax seal on your end.
I was waiting for that little bit. So they all get off the boats. There's a great big volley of fiery arrows comes towards them, and they shout "Shields!" because that's the Viking TV shows thing as well. It's very proud of its one piece of history, which is that they used shields. And they held shields up, despite having quite small shields. They held shields up a lot as their main war thing.
Incredible innovation. So we see a weapon being thrown, and I think Marsh was speculating that might be might be telling us that's a feature. That was in Assassin's Creed 3, though, right? You could throw tomahawks in that, I feel sure.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
This is. I mean, they're in a big open field at the moment. Oh, look, there's the bird. There's the bird that you're going to use to scout around. I guess.
It's going to be Odin's eye, isn't it? It's going to be a raven. For sure.
But what are you going to be climbing up? There's nothing to like run across the roof of in this big field.
Gentle rolling hills.
Yeah.
Hill parkour they're going to invent.
So there was also some discussion about the big bad Saxon soldiers helmet, which is quite Sutton Hooey, and yet he's got this sort of Roman kind of plume on it, red plume, which seems.
Who or what is Sutton Hoo?
Sutton Hoo is a Saxon burial site in Suffolk where there was a ship, and inside the ship there's a very famous helmet which you'll definitely recognise.
Right, yeah, the guy's helmet did look familiar.
Yeah.
I quite like the surprised wrist blade at the end. I sort of forgot.
Yeah, it's well done.
I forgot up until that moment that this was an Assassin's Creed game.
I've got to say, they got me perfectly. They paced it perfectly because at that exact moment I was thinking, where is the assassin in all this?
He's
very overt.
What was the animal on the art at the end? Was that looked like was a big wolf?
He's called either Wolf Lover or Wolf Touched or Wolf Licked or something.
That's a very bear-looking wolf.
Yeah, it does look like a bear. But then, like, video game animals, you know, they're all the same. Oh, you can actually, in that key art as well, you can see the raven in the background, like right next to his head.
I must admit, I've been looking forward to an Assassin's Creed set in England for a long time, or Britain for a long time, and that is.
Well, surely you had
very
Syndicate to
parochial
keep
of
you
me.
happy.
Oh God! I completely forgot about it, and guess what? I never even played it.
Fucking never give gamers what they want; they just ignore you.
Oh lordy! Yeah, but
so this is
Middle
as
Ages
I understand
one.
it, the play field is going to be between, like, is it Norway and UK?
I guess
not UK, but you know,
don't know.
England. I think I heard that somewhere. And so,
yeah, it is. Yeah, Norway.
We're sailing between them.
I also heard it was by the Ubisoft studio that did Black Flag, which was the good Bolton Assassin's Creed, wasn't it?
Well, them and another 15 other studios.
Well,
I'm not overstating that. I think it's 14 or 15 studios on this.
Really? Oh my God. It's insane.
Well, there's a lot of land to cover, a lot of land, and all that. That's dual wielding and throwable axes. So that's a lot to develop.
Can I wield different weapons in each hand and then independently throw them?
Yes.
I don't know why I'm asking, as if that's been
that was Ubisoft. York did that.
That's all they did. Because that was like it's actually pretty rare to have that like sort of completely freeform dual wielding thing. Because that was in Hitman. I think it was in Hitman 1, maybe, and they took it out. Yeah, they took it out for 2. Like Hitman 1, you could sort of independently assign weapons to each of your hands and then fire them both simultaneously, and it was completely over-engineered. You didn't need it, but they obviously thought it was cool, and then later they realized that was a lot of work. Let's not do that again.
I do get the sense with dual wielding in general that it is it's a concept which is only really there to be cool, because if you've got a well-designed weapon, you don't need 2 really. You know, I never really understood the appeal, basically.
I have been axe throwing in the last year, and you can throw 2 axes at once. That's a thing you get taught. It's way harder, but I think that's the thing where when you see it in like fantasy things, you always think, that's bullshit. Like, to actually do it well or accurately, you'd need to only throw 1 at a time. But no, you can throw 2.
I suppose it's just performing the same thing. As long as you can perform symmetrically, it's all good.
Yeah. I still don't really know. So the way, like an axe throwing range, you stand a fixed distance away. And so you learn through repetition to get the hang of like what, rotational speed to throw it at so that the blade ends up hitting first. But it's hard to imagine how you do that in like a battlefield where both you and the target are moving and judging that spin so that it's an exact multiple of 180 degrees seems a lot of, actually exact multiple of 360 degrees.
And I'm definitely disquieted by the fact that you're throwing away your weapon as well.
Is there any historical evidence that this was an actual thing, that people threw axes as a weapon?
Look, they found a lot of axes on the ground quite far from the people who with no weapons. So
my impression is that the response to this announcement has been way more excited than any Assassin's Creed game I've seen announced in a long time. It feels as if Odyssey did a lot of work to make people fall in love with that series again.
Yeah, people seem positive on it. I feel like Odyssey itself had a decent buzz around it, because all the changes they were talking about were pretty different to Origins. Origins is very you played as a single fixed character, and all this stuff about sort of turning cities to your side in Odyssey I remember people being excited about that, and it did turn out to be quite cool.
I guess Origins was
sorry, go ahead.
I guess Origins was a kind of soft reboot, wasn't it? Because that was the one where they'd taken 2 or 3 years out or something before making it after the disaster of the one before it. So I guess since then they've been kind of building up again.
Yeah, that was like the shift to RPG, basically. Like, let's make it a proper full open world thing with levels and leveled health and stuff. And people, I don't know, that I feel like they've made good on that, or they've figured out how to do it. I think Origins had some teething problems where the leveling stuff was a big mental stumbling block for people who are used to how the series used to work. You can't just drop assassinate somebody and be sure of killing them. It's all about the numbers, and level 25 enemy is going to have like 100 times the health of a level 1 enemy, and that's a little bit weird at first, but then I think it pays off in terms of just giving the landscape a texture and just like having a sense of like, oh god, this is a really dangerous area, I've got to be super careful, and I guess to some extent having a sort of feeling of progression. And then Odyssey,
that loot system was awfully kind of compelling.
Yeah, I think that the thing Odyssey fixed for me was the out and out combat, which is kind of mandatory in both games at times. You get to choose how to spec your character, but there are times in the story where it's just like, oh, at the end of this cutscene, you're already being attacked by people and there's no room to escape and you've got to just fight them. And in Origins, I just hated that combat. It just made no sense to me. I got worse at it the more I played it. Like my first few fights went better than the same enemies later when I came back with all I'd learned. Like the more I learned about it, the less well I could do it, because I'm like, oh, this just doesn't make any sense. And then Odyssey, I couldn't really tell you what the changes were, but Odyssey just kind of feels decent to me. It's still not a thick part of the game I really especially enjoy, but it has moments of, like when you're swinging a heavy mace in that game, it really feels like you're swinging a heavy mace, and just the logic of it made more sense, and I was able to like get through it.
Yeah, I wonder whether some of the excitement with Valhalla is it's just the setting. I think that sort of it just plays into lots of sort of fantasy sort of expectations, like anyone who likes Skyrim is just going to instantly recognize the color scheme and sort of feel, oh yeah, that's what I want to play. Great big world, sort of. I think the Viking fantasy just works so well for this series as well, as a concept. It's sort of
something I really hope they bring back from Odyssey is the cultists web thing. that
Yeah.
huge screen of just like, there are these 48 people out there somewhere in this world. They're already there. You could find them if you just went to the right place. But if you want to gather intel, here's where to look for, oh, this guy owns a mine in this area. And some of those were really gated, and you literally can't do this until you reach this point in the plot. But others were more freeform, and just if you get there and you figure it out, or if you do some side quests in that area, you get the info you need. And I loved that methodical thing of just knowing, like, there's a dude like 3 kilometers in that direction. He's marked on my HUD, and I'm just gonna go there by boat and by horse and by climbing over stuff until I get there and assassinate them.
So that's what I always wanted from the Assassin's Creed games from the start, really. That that fantasy of there being somebody in the world, somebody sort of who I can locate, and he is there. They are there to be assassinated, because what it actually boiled down to for the first few games was you're just playing story missions, and they're not really in the open world until you've triggered the story mission, which is almost like an instanced thing. And that's the thing that I really liked about that system. Thinking about this setting though, like, sort of, I think one of the things about it is that it's meant to be in this Britain, which is lots of different kingdoms and lots of factions all vying for power and things, with the Vikings sort of walking into the middle of it. I would guess that there's going to be a lot more sort of interfaction stuff going on. So presumably you'll do stuff for one side, like building on that system between the Spartans and the Athenians from Odyssey, which I didn't really get into. Never really understood what my part in it was, and it always seemed odd that I'd gone to war murdering everyone in the camp, and then some captain's going, "Hey, will you do a job for me?"
Yeah, they just even in the main plot, you end up working for both sides, and you just sort of have to. And they're a weird dividing line of, like, they seem to both expect you to care about this, but also you can't care about it because you're going to be forced to work for both. And
and also they would that they would turn on you from being friendly as well. And I never really understood what the parameters of the relationship I was meant to have with them.
Yeah, I tried to actually invest in it because one thing I liked about it was you get a choice fairly early on about, like, here's your dad, he's been a jerk. Do you forgive him or hate him still? And I was like, hate him. Just fucking kick him off a cliff. And he's a Spartan. And from then I was just like, okay, fuck all Spartans. I'm always on the Athenian side. I don't really know anything about the Athenians, but they're not Spartans, so I'm
They're
with
into
them.
owls and libraries, so they're all right.
And I felt like the game invited me to make that choice and to take a side, and then just didn't let me stick to it. It's just like, oh, you just can't do that.
Apparently, this new one's got base building stuff in it.
Here we go.
Yeah,
So
I heard. Don't you have just like one village and then you build that up?
I didn't realize it was just one village, but yeah, like you're building it up. Apparently, you can add a tattoo parlor to it, and then you can use that yourself in order to tattoo your character as part of the character customization stuff. But also, it's like there's like a raiding system where you can go to port towns and villages and stuff like that, raid them in order to get resources, which you can then spend to upgrade your own HQ, I guess.
I wonder about the how they're going to make that feel right in terms of, like, am I the bad guy?
Well, yeah, Chris was pointing out that kind of like, yeah, will you be taking many slaves in this game, given that was most of their money that the Vikings made, and that's what they founded Dublin for.
I mean, I guess the way that they'll navigate it is what these games often do, which is where, although your character comes from one side, there'll be characters on that side who are villains who are like, oh, they want to take all the slaves, and you'll speak up against them and like, no, we shouldn't be like that.
I mean, surely this is a thing that came up in the last game set in Greece and the game before that set in Egypt, right? Like, how did they deal with slavery and those sorts of issues?
Good question. You would think, having played, having completed Odyssey and having played a huge number of quests in it, that I would, remember. And I don't. What I do remember is somebody else criticizing it for that, in terms of I think each time it's raised, you get to sort of tut at slavery, but it's. I think it's always tough to do this because you can't have the character be cool with it, but you also kind of can't. It always rings false when you just have the character have an incredibly modern attitude about it just out of nowhere, just spontaneously. Oh, it's clear to me that this is completely wrong and will be gone in the future.
I've spent a lot of time on the Grecian equivalent of Tumblr, and I've learned that slavery is bad.
What else has been going on? Oh, I was interested to see that Fortnite has been given a new island, which is entirely gun-free, and all you can do is play mini games and socialize with people, with your friends and whatnot.
Huh.
Which I was banging on a few months ago about Roblox, and I think I said then I wrote about it a little bit as well, and about the fact that on Roblox, these sort of the most popular games on it are basically socializing and mini games places where you just go into a 3D world, play around in this whole playful environment and chat to your friends. And I wondered, and I have wondered for ages, why hasn't there really been anything like that in mainstream big bucks games? Like, I suppose there's a little bit of it in GTA Online and things like that, but I don't know. I don't know how much it's used as sort of a total chill out zone, in the same way that it is in Fortnite or in Roblox. And then Fortnite, let's stick it in. We'll do music concerts. We'll do what's huge on Roblox as well. Let's make it an everything game.
Oh, is that? I saw that concert where the dude was enormous. That one that everyone saw. I don't remember anything else about it. Someone went underwater at some point. And was that part of this new gunless map?
No, I don't believe so. No, it's a separate thing. So that's just like an event. I think. Graham, do you know how many times that they played that the music show? Is it like 4 or 5 times or something?
I don't know actually. I know they've done a bunch of different events that are similar to this because, like, around the last Star Wars film, for example, they showed an exclusive clip in game, which was presented beforehand by a digital version of, I think, J.J. Abrams and maybe Jeff Keighley as well was there. And so, like,
he probably was. He's always there.
But
I wish I could have seen that.
My understanding was that this stuff was happening just in the midst of like a regular Fortnite match, and so like you could just still be getting gunned down while this was happening. But I'm not
most distracted by JJ. Not fair.
It was Travis Scott was this concert there,
Travis Scott.
And 27 million people watched it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, it's so worth it. I thought the performance was. I thought that the staging and the way it was presented was just extraordinary. Like, to be there would be hell of a cool.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, like it's like,
yeah,
it's as if the character is in the skybox. Like, it's the thing you get. I don't know if other games do it this way, but in Half-Life 2, the skybox would be like a little miniature set of skyscrapers built somewhere outside the level that then had a camera pointed at it, and then what the camera was seeing was then projected into the sky at enormous scale. And so it was almost like you could, as a player, then go no clip over to that zone, and if you were on a multiplayer map with someone else, you would then appear giant to whoever else was in the regular map. And so I like to just pretend that these musicians are getting trapped in the skybox and forced to perform.
And no clipped.
Yeah, what I also liked about it is that some of the visual effects looked straight out of sort of demo scene stuff. These geometric shapes flying at you and colored light shows, and while it was it's modern popular music, kids, but it's like I like the fact that it also harkened to wonderfully dorky kind of old people's computery stuff as well, which is fitting for kind of Epic, given Tim Sweeney, that's his jam. Yeah. So what have we been playing? Tom, what have you been playing?
I have, of course, been playing XCOM Chimera Squad, which we talked about. Well, I talked about the announcement of it, and then Tom Senior talked about actually playing it, and now I have also played it. It's of special interest to me because it's so similar in some of its changes to the XCOM formula, to Tactical Breach Wizards, which is the game I'm working on, and it's fascinating to play their take on it. It's been a bizarre experience because it's so much. The game they're making is so much what I wanted. They're making so many changes that I wanted this so much. I made this change, and but I'm starting to realize I think their motives must have been different because the reason I wanted small controlled encounters was to solve the clarity problems of XCOM, because XCOM takes place on multiple levels. Walls are forever getting in the way of what you're trying to see. Everything's kind of a bit glitchy and ambiguous, and people can shoot through walls sometimes, and people stand on top of each other in weird ways, and there's all these problems to do with that. And they've just brought all that over. Like, it's smaller arenas, but they'll have all of those problems in spades of just forever having walls obscure my vision. I can't see where somebody is because they're on top of something, and then get shot by an enemy I didn't know was in the arena at all because they're hidden behind something. Like, all of that, they've packed it all into a tighter space, but it's all still there. So that makes me think, like, oh, so your reason for doing that was not the same as it was just coincidence that you also thought there should be small arenas. It wasn't apparently to increase clarity. And then another major thing from XCOM that I was keen to avoid, and another reason to split things into individual encounters, was the huge difficulty spikes in XCOM from the randomness. And so this is, probably hardcore players would dispute that this is randomness, but for me, when I'm playing XCOM 2, I'm inching my people forwards, and I inch 5 of them forwards painstakingly into perfect cover, and the 6th one also goes into perfect cover, the last spot taken, but because there are no other spots, it's like 1 square further forward than some of the others, and that's what triggers 2 pods of enemies, which then both activate. All those enemies run to cover, and none of my other people can take a turn because they all just use their action this turn, and then I'm just get absolutely torn apart by this huge squad. Just because I clicked on 1 square that I couldn't have known was going to trigger all these people. And the only way to avoid that is to, move 1 person forwards and then never move anybody else further than that until you've done, and just inch forwards even more painstakingly, even more boringly. And I always felt disproportionately punished for that in XCOM, and it led to these crazy, like, taking on 2 pods of enemies is more than twice as hard as taking on 1. If you do everything incredibly painstakingly and rigorously and carefully, you only ever take on 1 pod at a time, pretty much. And so the game is less than half as difficult than if you don't. And sometimes you trigger 3 pods of enemies. A pod, by the way, is just like a group of like 4 or 5 enemies. And the difference is just insane. At least these massive spikes, and sometimes that's what costs you your favorite team member, or worse, it just like wipes out a couple of your best guys, and from then on your campaign is basically unwinnable because the people who replace them and new recruits, they can never catch up on the skill curve, and your whole campaign is scotched. So it doesn't have that exact problem because it is controlled encounters, and in theory, all the enemies that are in that encounter, and you can't trigger a new one. You can't stumble into a new group of enemies. But they've reinserted that random difficulty by just your objective is usually to like stop the enemies from killing a VIP, or stop the enemies from leaving. Quite often the enemies are trying to like get away, or they're trying to get to a particular console or something and activate it. And it randomly assigns which ones will be doing this. And there are obviously, when the thing you're trying to stop them from doing is reaching a door, there are several important ways that enemies differ from each other and how hard it's going to be to stop them from doing that. One is how much health they have, and the other is how close are they to the door right now. And sometimes there's one on the climactic mission of one of these threads. There's sort of different investigation threads you can follow, and there's 3 of them, and you do them all, but you choose what order. The climax of one of those, my goal is to stop. I won't spoil anything story-wise, but my goal is to stop the enemies are all trying to activate this one thing on the other side of the map, and I've got to stop them from doing it. And it's random who tries to do it. The person who tried to do it was the boss, who is he's a type of enemy that we've encountered before, but is like a mini boss type enemy with a huge health bar and massive armor. And every time you hit him, he gains more armor. And in addition to that, he's also immune to a whole load of things, like sort of you have various attacks that can kind of disable somebody or pull them over to you. Those work on his type normally, but this, because he's a boss, he's immune to all of those. And he starts right next to the objective. If it selects him to activate the objective, he goes there in his first turn. There's physically no way we could ever reduce that health bar to 0 before he gets a turn. When he gets a turn, that's mission over. Mission failed. The whole thing's over. So I just had to restart that mission 3 times until it randomly selected enemies that weren't right next to the objective and indestructible. So it's bizarre. They sort of did all this work that effectively removed those random difficulty spikes and then just sort of put them back in basically a worse way. Like, I don't remember anything in XCOM and the previous XCOMs being that like binary of just, if it rolls this way, you just cannot win. I should say though, I'm really enjoying it. I mean, this is my thing with XCOM, and this is why I thought it was worth making a game in this genre. Was I would play XCOM for like 200 hours, and if you ask me how's XCOM going, I would just rant for 4 hours on everything that's wrong with it. Like, oh, the clarity, like, I'm dying, I'm permanently losing super important units because of straight up bugs or UI. Catastrophic UI that's lying to me and misleading me, and it's awful. Also, I'm going to play it again tonight for another 6 hours. And I thought, like, if the game can be that good with this many problems, then if you fix some of those problems, then you would have an incredible thing. And then they seem to, I thought, be doing that. And weirdly, that my 2 biggest problems seem to be either unaddressed or addressed and then reintroduced in a new form. So that's been the sort of like frustrating part of playing it, or the sort of, I don't know, baffling part of playing it. But then the upside of playing it is, like, A, it's XCOM again, which I really, really like. And then B, because it's unique characters, basically everyone is their own class. And so rather than having sort of 4 main classes with some sub variants you can get to by speccing them differently, instead you have about 9 different classes. And they sort of let themselves go a bit more characterful with them as well. They're a bit more exaggerated. They're different to each other. Some of them are aliens, so they can do alien things. There's a snake, and the snake can lick people from across the battlefield and pull them towards her with her tongue. And then,
so who's in your core team? Like, who are your faves?
I currently it's Blue Blood, the pistol guy. Zephyr, who is the melee hybrid lady. Who's Australian, and Godmother, the assault lady with the shotgun, and usually either Verge or Cherub. Verge is the psionics guy who can lift people up or stupor them, and Cherub I benched for a long time, and then I had enough missions where we lost because the objective was protect this VIP, and on turn 1, the enemy just shoots the VIP. And Cherub can, at least, if they go first, they can put a shield on that enemy, on that VIP, and that'll block the first hit they take. So I reintroduced Cherub. And that's my usual team. How about you?
Similar. I mean, I'm not as far as you, so I haven't met Zephyr or anything. But I've Cherub and Verge, Godmother. And then I've been going between Snake Lady, and who's the other one? Can't remember. Blue Blood is. So I don't really like games that make me bench people, know. And then this is a game where you have to actually invest that character for several turns in a project. And if you haven't got a project on the go, that's bad, but also the game really lets you know about it. It does not want you not to have anybody not doing something, and I'm just sort of like, I've got nothing against Blue Blood at all, but he came in at a point at which I'd leveled up my that first 4 team members that you get from the start of the game, leveled them up a couple of times. They're doing well. I know what I'm doing with them. New guy comes in. I've just been. I have him get the glad hand people, which is one of the projects. Or is it?
That's a special operations, by the way.
Yeah, was that money, or is
that's
it
Spec Ops?
Yeah,
glad handing is the money one.
Yeah, so it's just like he earns money, like earning money, or he might be researching stuff. I don't know, but I want to put him in, but also I've got all these much higher level characters who are more fun to use, and I just don't want to go back. I don't want to go back and sort of. I don't like that kind of design where I'm having to sort of stop using something with actually knowing that I'm letting myself down for the long run by using them or not using someone else. I'm a bit frustrated with that.
They try and fix that with that training thing, and actually the Spec Ops as well.
It's true.
There are some which there's some
But
Spec
the
Ops you can
training
only
thing
do if you're a
doesn't.
certain rank, and so
But the training
they're
thing, you
trying
have to
push you
actually you have to lose them for a couple more turns for that, and you're not even earning money that way around.
Yeah, I think pretty quickly you get to the point where you have enough that you can be both have someone assisting in research, someone training, and someone doing Spec Ops, and then I actually have one person spare after that as well. And anyway, what I was going to say is that the Spec Ops thing, there are some Spec Ops you can only do with an agent of a certain rank, and so that's supposed to, I think, push you to bench your best people to have them do some really important Spec Op. But the Spec Ops are never that important, and they're all to do with the meta game. They don't really get you a cool ability or anything like that. And then training, I think you're supposed to. It's supposed to be like, oh, well, rather than leaving someone on the bench and they're just kind of like getting more and more obsolete, you put them in training and then they're getting better and better. But the stuff they get better at is so basic and uninteresting compared to the people you're fielding and leveling up. And so when they level up, they get new abilities, and those are really strong and make a big difference. Whereas just getting like another 1 health or getting plus 15 dodge or something, it's not exciting, and also it's not practical. It's not going to
and equipment
doesn't lead
often
to you
gives
actually
you
like
more anyway.
Yeah. So I wish it seems like there's loads of ways you could do this. Like one thing, once you've got like 6 people, why not have me take on 2 missions at once where I have to decide which 3 people are going to go on this one, which 3 people are going to go on that one. And then
well, that's a pretty typical thing, isn't it? Like you'd send a squad off to do a sort of automatic, an automatic mission, which they'll just come back with a bunch of XP, and that's used in all sorts of other games.
Yeah, I was talking about actually like having you play both missions, just you play them one after the other, but in fiction they happen simultaneously. Because that's the thing we're talking about doing for Wizards is we could just have you split your squad once it gets big enough. And in fiction, these 2 things happen at the same time, but for you as the player, you get to play both of them out.
Yeah, that sounds like a solution. I think you should write in with it.
I did find I've usually been when I get a new agent, I will field them, and I don't feel the game has sort of prevented me from doing that. Although we'll see the next time I get them, because my squad is almost all max level now. I think only Blue Blood has not got his final ability, and in theory, I started mixing my squad up slightly for the first time once Godmother hit max level. When it's not a climactic mission, I benched her and brought in someone else to give them some XP to try and get more people up to max level. And then, each time someone hits max level, they become eligible to be benched for a while because there's no longer any benefit to them to being on the squad. It's only if I actually need them to win. And I guess that's making it a bit better. But yeah, it's weird they didn't come up with any effective way to encourage you to do that beforehand.
Yeah.
I've been really surprised how many people you pass up as well. Like you get offered a new agent and it'll be 3 choices. You pick one. The 2 other options for my first choice ever made have never come up again. So those, I probably won't see them in this whole campaign. I have to start a whole new campaign to get access to those at all.
Oh wow! So there are other characters, like written characters, which basically, you won't actually be playing with if you don't choose them.
Yep. Yeah, there's loads of them. I think it's like 11 characters or something.
I didn't know that. Didn't know that at all. I'm definitely enjoying the session length, and I've seen a few people saying similar, but I'm enjoying the fact that the metagame is simple, and that I'm just going from mission to mission. This is not a novel thing to say at all, but I found XCOM 2 too stressful. I did not really. I just bounced off it the 3 or 4 times that I tried to play it, because it's just things telling me things to worry about over and over again. I know that eventually it settles into a rhythm and you get fully kind of invested, but I never got over that hump. And I just appreciate just having these really short form, really tight little encounters, which, they can be uneven, but I'm enjoying the fact that it's just guiding me through to a large extent.
How
Yeah.
long does like a single mission take to play for?
Maybe about, I'd say probably about 10 minutes, maybe, but it's divided into, often it's divided into three or four, or three maybe individual encounters, one after the other. So you're
Okay.
kind of, you breach the first area and then you breach the second or third one. And like a threer probably would take about 10 minutes, would you reckon, Tom?
Probably a bit longer for me, at least.
Yeah.
Feels like maybe 5 minutes per encounter, so like a longer. I definitely like
Yeah,
some of the
that's probably
climatic ones have
accurate.
taken me maybe 20 minutes. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's short compared to XCOM. XCOM would be like at least 45 minutes for a mission
Mm,
for me.
man, that sounds really nice. Actually, that makes me want to go play it. Just the fact that it's this, the missions are shorter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's got. I really like the. Well, the interleaved turns is a really interesting change. So, unlike XCOM, where you'd move all of your squad and then you click end turn, and then the enemies move all of their people, in this game, um, everyone is interleaved in this one turn order. So it's going to be Godmother goes first, then one of the aliens does, and then Cherub goes, and then another alien does. And that is a big change. And it's once you get the hang of it, there's a nice little mini game within that, basically, where um, when you look at a room full of enemies in XCOM, you're thinking, okay, who's the guy who's really going to mess us up? Who do we need to take out first? And you still kind of think that way, and I definitely did at first in Chimera Squad. But as I played more, I've realized actually it's not so much who can do the most damage when they have their turn. It's just whose turn is it next. Because
Yeah.
if you kill them before that turn happens, then they don't get that turn, and then it doesn't matter if you didn't take out the biggest threat yet, because now you've got one of your guys is going to go, and then they can do that potentially.
And I like the fact that it's not quite as simple as that, because you do, as you said, like you do still have to consider the most dangerous one. So you're kind of going, well, I could go for the weak one who's next, or I could go to the strong one who I've got to deal with at some bloody point.
Yeah, and also each of your people, I've certainly got to the point where some of my people are better at dealing with certain things. Like some of them can penetrate armor, and some of them can't. And so it's like, well, the turret's not the most important thing to kill, but on the other hand, this is Blue Blood. He's got the AP rounds. If anyone's going to kill it, he needs to do it. So maybe I use his turn for that, just in case it's going to be the next one to cause me problems before anyone else can get in with that. And yeah, it's really satisfying once you sort of crack this code and you realize, like, oh yeah, if I'm going to kill the enemy that's number 2 in the turn order, and in the same turn I can stupefy the one who's number 3, which means he's going to skip his next turn. That means after that it's Godmother's turn. She can take out the person who's going to go number 5, and if you pull it off perfectly, you can actually like clear a room without the enemies ever getting a turn. And it's you need luck on your side to do that, but that's really satisfying when it works.
Yeah.
But the downside of the interleave turns is that it means that situational abilities are much less useful. And I've really felt that there's a character whose like key signature ability is swap. And as you probably already know, swap is one of my favorite abilities in every game that it's in. This is the first time swap has not been good. And it works just the same way as it did in XCOM War of the Chosen. And in theory, there are situations where it's super useful. But because you don't choose when this guy gets his turn, that means I'm forever like, okay, it's my turn, and there's a perfect situation for swap, but I'm not controlling swap guy. I'm someone else for this turn. And I can't just sort of switch to him and use his ability in this situation. And then by the time it gets to swap guy's turn, the situation's changed completely, and now the only spots enemies are in are spots it would be really bad for me to be in. And it uses up an action, so it's going to leave me kind of abandoned. He doesn't have the swap ability in XCOM War of the Chosen was on the Templar, and the Templar also was the melee class who, after they attack, could make themselves invulnerable to the next attack. And so swapping them into danger wasn't so bad because you could basically make them invulnerable. Obviously, if they got hit twice, that would be bad, but it was usually a safe bet. They'd just take one hit and survive it, and it all paid off. This guy doesn't have anything like that, so he just swaps into danger, and he's just screwed. And it's going to be ages before he gets another turn. And so with a really, really heavy heart, I just had to say, look, mate, sit down. You're not coming on the next mission. Swap just turns out not to be very good here. And he gets, I think there's some interesting stuff with him later on. I've heard talk of his later abilities, but that's definitely the price you pay for interleave turns, is just that if your character's abilities are situational, they're 4 times less likely to be able to use them in the right situation.
I mean, there are those team up abilities, I guess, meant to be in concert with that. But yeah,
Yeah, and that's you can only do that once per mission, and like you say, a
That's
mission can be up
true.
to 3 encounters, and so that I don't really like that system, having persistent consumables that last, or abilities that have uses per mission when a mission can be up to 3 encounters, and you don't know what the other encounters are going to entail. Naturally, this is the most well-known thing in game design. Basically, the player will hoard stuff if there's any uncertainty about when they're going to get more or what they're going to need it for. And so I pretty much don't use any. If there's any permission ability, I'm not going to use it till the final phase unless I absolutely have to, unless it's like life or death. And that team up thing, once or twice I have used it early because, like you say, that it's a bit of a help for that situational problem where actually I haven't really used it in that way. I haven't. Most of the time I'm using it because the person I'm bringing up is going to be in trouble, like they need to move. So I'll bring them up in the turn order so that they can move before the enemy that's going to endanger them will take their attack. But yeah, that's it helps a bit, but I wish it wasn't per mission.
Yeah. What do you think about the breach system as a resident expert on such matters?
Because I'm playing on gamepad, that menu is hell. It is, and this is. I don't want to be too hard on the game for this because it's great that it has gamepad support. A lot of strategy games don't prioritize that, and this is a PC-only release at the moment, so it's kind of cool that it shipped with gamepad support at all. But I have to say the gamepad support is really ropey. None of the menus feel like, basically. So with a cursor, you're clicking on these individual slots and icons and putting people into these slots. With a gamepad, you're not controlling a cursor, and there's this sort of invisible notion of like where your selection is. And in Chimera Squad, on the breach menu, every time your selection starts on a slot that doesn't exist. So if you just press the A button to bring down the submenu of who you're going to put in the slot, it'll do it. It'll bring up the people, and you choose one, and they go nowhere because a slot that doesn't exist is selected. So every time at the start of that menu, you've got to remember to press right first before you select anybody in order to move it off the invisible null slot and get it into slot number 1. And then it's forever. It doesn't, after you've put someone in a slot, the selection stays on that slot as well. So my natural thing is, okay, select Godmother, then select Blue Blood. Oh, you've replaced Godmother with Blue Blood now. So you're back to the start. And it's like, every menu is like that. Like all of the intuitive ways that you would want to use it undoes what you just did. And the squad select, on like the city map, there's in the top right, there's who you're going to bring on the squad.
Yeah,
there's a button.
It's the same principle, isn't it?
There's a button to jump to that, and like the most common situation is you've got 3 people in it. There's one empty slot because you reassign somebody somewhere, and the game's going to yell at you forever about that. And so I hit the squad selection button, and it brings up, and the empty slot is like highlighted a little bit. It's like as if it's selected, but if you press select now and choose somebody, it'll look like you're putting someone in that slot, but actually you're replacing one of the valid choices. By default, it selects one of the valid choices to undo that. And so now you've taken 2 people out of your squad. And it's just, oh God. It's just like rubbing your belly and patting your head every time you use any of these interfaces. Anyway, that was kind of a digression because once you use the mouse of the breach menu, it's way easier to use. It is so intricate though. There's so much to it, and there's so many rules that I'm like 25 hours in. I'm still only just realizing, like, for example, if there's multiple entry points, each entry point is its own queue. Each queue is a number of slots. You can put people in different slots, but also some slots are locked by what people have in their inventory. And then also when you slot them, they might have multiple different abilities that they could use at this breach, but they can't use that other ability if they're the first one through the breach, and they can't use it in this other situation, and they can't use it in that situation. And then also that entry point will have a buff on it that affects only the person who's last through it. And this other one has one that only affects the person who's first through it. But actually one of your people might be kind of immune to that buff, like my fists person. It doesn't matter if their weapon gets disabled because their weapon is their fists. And there's just so many layered rules. And then I only just discovered like 20 hours in that those groups of queues, you can reorganize those as well. So there's little like arrows on them, and you can click one of those to like put one further up in the priority order so that you'll breach through that entry first.
Oh, what? So they'll be first in the turn order?
Yep. So they'll be first in the breach turn and also first in the turn order from then on as well.
Because I remember there was a tooltip about it really early on in the game, like, oh, you've got multiple entry points, but this will affect their turn order, but I didn't know how, and I still don't know how. It's not intuitive.
Yeah, there's so much hidden information like that. And those buffs for the different breach entry points, I was curious for a long time how much of this game is generated and how much is handcrafted. Yeah. I think I pretty much concluded that those are generated, because I got one where it was like, the last person through this breach point will go into Overwatch. Also, all people through this breach point will go into Overwatch. So there are these little redundant choices there. So like, I think you're randomly choosing these. I don't think they have any meaning at all. That's a mechanic that we were going to do for Breach Wizards, or it was on the table, was breach abilities. Like when you bust through a door, not only do you bust through the door, but because you're doing it with this character, there's some kind of perk to that. And we might still do them. I'm finding with XCOM, I mean, the thing XCOM does actually is not what we were going to do, which is a breach perk is a function of the entry point, not of the person who goes through. So it doesn't matter who breaches, whoever it is, they will get this buff because the window is buffing you or the door is buffing you. I mean, some of them make sense. Like, if you blow up a wall, the perk for that is usually that everyone will be really surprised that a wall blew up. But then others seem pretty arbitrary. Like, what is it about this plate glass window that means the last person through it will go into Overwatch? Those feel arbitrary in a way that I wouldn't really want for our game. Our game, they're supposed to be to do with a character. And a character can have... Characters, it's confusing, because characters can have a breach-specific ability that is not an ability that breaches, which is after they've breached, on that first breach turn, which is like a special phase, they get to use this ability that they then can't use once the mission starts, even if they didn't use it in the breach turn, which is kind of weird. But yeah, it all feels like a mess of concepts. Like, it is cool. Yeah. Like once the breach happens and it goes into slow-mo thing and everything, it's really nicely presented in terms of, it feels like slow-mo, but actually time is paused, and it's you're cycling through these targets and figuring out who to hit when, and sometimes you pull off like a really neat sort of execution of all the key targets on your first turn, and that feels nice. But
it's weird though. I find it, I mean, it is a really great traumatic moment, and you do feel great when you pull off lots of kills, but it feels so uneven. I often feel that I didn't really earn, that big success, because you can delete enemies. That is it's super powerful, and then and then people are surprised, and that wasn't really down to me either, because I only had 2 breach points, and one of them was all negative things, and the one I went through was all positive effects, and of course I was going to go for that, and then the room's clear, and I just okay, well, I didn't really feel I had much to do with that, and my characters and the way that I've equipped them and things that didn't also play that much of a part in it. It's a great moment with a very powerful payoff, and yeah, it's a bit hands off. It can feel a bit hands off for me.
I think it gets less common that you can clear a room in a breach as the game goes on. Like, at this point, I don't think in the last sort of 5 odd missions I've played, I don't think I've ever killed someone in one hit in a breach. Like, if I want to take somebody out in a breach, I need at least 2 people to hit them. And so it's less of a like huge win. And usually what you're focused on is like, there's 4 aggressive enemies, and aggressive means they're going to shoot you during the breach. And so I will get Verge to levitate one of them so that they're not. Or what I'll do is I order it so that Godmother goes through first, because she's got a powerful shotgun. She's going to she'll find an aggressive enemy that has like a decent medium amount of health and try and kill them. Usually she won't be able to kill them in one shot. And so then Blue Blood is next. He's the pistol guy. He can finish somebody off. He does a smaller amount of damage, but he's good at hitting things. And so he's kind of seals the deal. And then assuming we were able to take out that aggressive enemy, Verge will usually be third, and he will levitate an aggressive enemy that just has a crazy health bar. Just one, we're never going to kill him in a breach, so we don't even try. We just have Verge levitate him to stop him. And then Zephyr, she's the melee one. Her breach ability, she can't shoot anybody because she doesn't have any guns, and so she just basically plans to attack somebody during the breach phase. Like everyone else is doing all this cool shooting stuff, and she just kind of looks at someone threateningly. She does that like Matrix "come here" kind of gesture at somebody.
Does she? She actually animates that.
Yeah, it like freezes on her doing the come here gesture. Although she, like, the person doesn't come there, she has to go to them. But then it's still awesome because they brought back my absolute favorite ability in XCOM. XCOM, I think if you'd asked me after XCOM 2 what my favorite ability was, it's either Kill Zone or Blade Storm. And Kill Zone is the sniper one where you set up a field of fire and every single thing that enters it gets shot on the enemy turn, and that's really cool. And Blade Storm was the assault class melee specialty ability where every time an enemy enters or leaves melee range of this person or tries to attack in melee range of this person, they get a free melee attack on them. And I remember it being amazing in XCOM, and Zephyr has it in Chimera Squad. But Zephyr, rather than using a sword and slicing everybody, she just kicks people in the face. And I love this ability before, but now it's like this has replaced Swap as my favorite ability in all of XCOM. It just makes me laugh out loud every time it happens. There's something just kicking somebody in the face is pretty funny to begin with, but the fact that it's you so rarely get anything for free in XCOM. Everything's like hard earned. If you get to even take a shot on somebody the enemy turn, it's because you wasted one of your actions setting that up, and then it usually misses anyway because you have a huge accuracy debuff. Whereas this is just like free violence all the time. And it's so common. Like, I think one of the glorious things about it is the enemy doesn't seem to know it exists. They're not allowed any awareness that this is going to happen to them. And so I feel like I'm trolling the enemy with this character. I will just I'll have her run into danger. My choice for who I have her do the Matrix move at in the breach phase is not based on who I want her to take out. It's just like, who's in the most awkward position? Just someone who's miles in, like, really deep into enemy lines in the middle of everything. Let's get Zephyr over there, because once she's there, she's going to kick this person on the breach turn, but then everyone who moves past her during the enemy turn is going to get kicked in the face as well. And I even had it where on her way to kick somebody in the breach phase, she passed somebody else, and so she kicked them because technically they'd entered her melee range, even though she was the one who was moving. And yeah, it's just so satisfying just to see, like, you can just kind of park her after she's kicked this one person. She also gets a free momentum move, so after she's kicked, she can also take another move, and that could get her out of danger. Or what I more normally do is, if that enemy's actually dealt with, if we've taken them out, then I just move her to be adjacent to somebody else, so that next time they try and do anything, they also get kicked in the face.
I should. So you mentioned sort of violence. We should probably sort of mention that the other game that we're talking about tonight is another strategy, turn-based strategy game. And there's like the comparison between these two games is like super fascinating. And so we've also been playing Gears Tactics. Graham, you had the go first, didn't you?
Yeah, like Gears Tactics was announced at E3 like a year and a half ago, I think, alongside a bunch of other Gears things. Like, it was announced at the same time, I think, as the Gears Funko Pops game for mobile, which probably unfairly tainted Gears Tactics in some way of like, they're making a bunch of weird spin-offs for Gears, and Gears feels like a series that, like, Gears 5 got really good reviews, but it feels like a series that sort of no one's super interested or excited about Gears games right now. It doesn't feel like. And the last one I played was 2. But I've only played a couple of hours of Gears Tactics so far, but it turns out to be really good. Based on my experience and based on reviews it's getting. The reason I was interested in it was I had a similar experience to you, Alex, with XCOM 2, where I just bounced off it. I really liked XCOM Enemy Unknown, but with XCOM 2, I found it stressful, and in particular, I found the geoscape stuff just too much. Too many things popping up on a map, too many countdown timers, and not enough way for me to understand like which of these things is important, what is the thing I should be caring about, how do I prioritize these things. And Gears Tactics just doesn't have that strategy layer at all. It doesn't have a geoscape or anything equivalent. It is just like Chimera Squad. It's just the battles, and it's a proper Gears of War game turned into a tactics game in that you could take control of a squad of incredibly wide men, most of whom are bald, and you mow down, I would say, far more enemies than you ever fight in any of the XCOM games at once.
Yeah.
Like there are hordes in this that you're fighting against. I think it's set 12 years before the first Gears of War. I'm not even sure if it's set on Earth. I think it's set on Earth, or it might just be a planet which has been colonized. I'm not up on my Gears lore, but you're moving your way through these cities which are ravaged, half destroyed, being fully destroyed by other humans in an attempt to get rid of the alien blight that are bursting out from underneath the ground. And you're putting together like a little squad of muscle meat men. And like it's very similar to XCOM in a lot of the ways to do with how the combat works. Although it's been years since I played XCOM 2, so correct me if any of this is different. But you enter into an area. It's not interleave turns. You're going to move all your men, then the enemy's going to move all their guys. It's an action point system, and each of your units has 3 or 4 action points, which you can then spend however you want across moving a bit further if you want to spend more action points on it, or just stay still and take 3 shots at enemies, which is useful when there's 10 enemies running at you at the same time, all in the same field. Your units, aside from having guns and grenades, also have special abilities. So, for example, the main man, Gabe Diaz, who's sort of like the third-person shooter protagonist, main character man, he has like the ability to give an action point to any of his fellow soldiers on the battlefield, which can be useful for getting you out of jams. There's a scout character that you pick up, a scout class rather, you pick up quite early on, that she can turn invisible. She's useful. And then it's got a bunch of like Gearsy type stuff to try and encourage you, I think, to play it more like you would a Gears game. So, for example, if you shoot an enemy and reduce their health bar to nothing, they enter into a down state where they're on their knees, at which point you can charge over to them to perform an execution move. And if you run over to them and perform that execution move, everyone on your squad then gets an extra action point, which is like hugely powerful and encourages you to play quite aggressively. Like you can set up scenarios where you down an enemy, send a man like over cover into quite a dangerous situation so that you can execute someone, so that all your other guys can then get action points so that they can go shoot more men and maybe put themselves into a position to execute someone so that everyone gets another action point again, and propel yourself across the battlefield this way. How much have you guys played it?
I played similar to you, I think. Maybe another hour or so. I've started getting more characters joining the gang, and but like the missions have been up until I think I got a generated one, the first generated one recently, like one of the last ones I've played. But I've just been playing through story. It's been cutscene. Like the cutscenes are very high production value.
I've been blown away.
You're kind of used to tactics games, kind of just either doing the Chimera thing of having sort of comic book style kind of interstitial stuff, or kind of fairly rough, in engine stuff. This is like, oh my god, it looks like a full blown Gears game.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm about an hour in, I think. I'm doing the first mission where you have more than 2 people. And that has been wild because I'd heard about the system, but that you execute people and you get free actions for it. that's the way I heard it. Was you execute and you get free actions, so you can keep chaining it together and get loads of actions. But that's not quite how it works, as you say, Graham. Everyone else gets actions for it, and so
Yeah, but you don't.
the person who did the execution is running out of actions, but everyone else is getting them. And when there's like two people, that's kind of interesting because it's like, okay, you could kind of leapfrog it. If you have enough downed enemies, you could have one execute that gives the other one enough action points to get to another one to execute them, and so on. And that's kind of cool, because it's a lot more interesting having one star player doing everything. But then this mission where I've got 4 people, that system becomes insane. Like the end of the first turn where we set up some good Overwatch zones and mowed some people down, there was like 3 or 4 downed enemies. And by having my scout take out, I think 2 of them, and then someone else take out a third, like they're busy, they're refueling each other in this leapfrogging way that I was already thinking about. But then I was really like, the guy at the back line has got 6 actions now. He can get all the way from the back line to the front line and kill like 2 more people, just off the back of this like banked actions. He was just sitting there way back in the stacks, just watching this happen and getting so amped up. Like, man, when you guys are done, I can move infinitely fast.
You can just like hear him sort of whooping, go, yeah!
They do actually fictionalize it that way, right? Like there's a line about like, oh, that's a sight like that makes me so amped up or something.
Well, there's also like other than Gabe Diaz, the other soldier you start with is this walrus of a man called Sid, who is like bald with an enormous mustache and an eye patch.
He is Marcus Phoenix. He's
the most generic man in the world.
Yeah, but I'm sort of instantly in love with him.
I love him. He's great.
But his special ability is, I think it's called like Intimidate or something like that.
Yeah.
Where he just fucking roars on the battlefield, and all the aliens, if they're on Overwatch, then it disrupts their Overwatch, like interrupts
So we should say
whatever
that
action they're doing, and it causes them, like everyone else, to stagger backwards. So you've got all these mutants that all just like stagger backwards 6 feet because this man roared at them.
Because this is like Overwatch in this game is really, really important. Like it's sort of, it really wants you to like it like I don't know, I love this sort of balance. It's uneasy balance, it's striking, all this tension it's striking between it wants you to be aggressive, but it also wants you to set up kind of in cover shooting. It's like playing the game, like in the game you're constantly sort of keying up between, do I stay in cover and sort of shoot from here, or do I rush out and do an execution and do play that way. And the way, and when you set Overwatch and you set them in very defined arcs on the battlefield, and then the enemy will very frequently do the same, and constantly like, oh, I'm being locked down by these by enemy Overwatch arcs. And so when bellowing man bellows, like, it's the best thing. You better believe I upgraded him to his 10-yard bellow.
I was amazed that Overwatch is such a big part of it, and because I thought that the philosophy of this was the opposite. Like XCOM 2 is all about careful shuffling and Overwatch zones and everything, and a problem they're always trying to solve with that series is how do we make the player be more aggressive. And then Gears is like, oh, you just rush in and murder people and you get free actions for it and it can go on forever. But actually Overwatch, I mean, like you say, enemies use Overwatch a lot, but it's actually quite different to XCOM, where they'll just point Overwatch right at you. They can already shoot you, but they decided to Overwatch at you instead, or they do both. And then when they have Overwatch on you, you can't, even shooting back will trigger their Overwatch. So like everything you do will trigger the Overwatch. And it seems to be, I think they want to encourage you where possible to have a different soldier solve the Overwatch problem for the first one. Like if there's anyone who's not in that Overwatch zone, then they can kind of go around the side. But then your own Overwatch is, firstly, it will take all the actions that you have left. So if all you do in your turn is go into Overwatch, you'll be able to shoot 3 times in Overwatch. It's basically that kill zone ability I was talking about from XCOM. Like that's just by default for any character. And then also, I've never seen it miss. Every single Overwatch shot we've taken has hit and usually killed somebody, which is totally different to XCOM. XCOM's like, oh, I guess you can go to Overwatch, but are we going to have a huge accuracy penalty because we don't want you to actually get anything done with this? And then Gears is like, no, it's better than shooting them. Like if I shoot them, I've got like a 10% chance. If I go into Overwatch, 100% chance.
They do miss, but yeah, it's it's so good when you just see, because it also it feels very much like a horde mode game, which is fitting because this is where horde mode came from. I think
Yeah.
the first horde mode came from Gears of War, didn't it? And like it just, yeah, as Graham said, like it throws enemies at you, and there's this one type. What are they called? The grots, or the, I don't know what they are. They're kind of
The
these
little
very
monkey
best
fellas.
little monkey fellas. I remember them being really annoying in the original games, but they come in these clusters at you, and you just set up Overwatch where they're coming at you and just watch, just mowing down the bullet with bullets, and it feels so good. But then, you know, it it's really controlled about it. You've then got to spend, this is a game in which you run out, you've got to reload all the time, and reloading and managing your ammo is really, really important in this game. And I think that the Gears series in general is tend to, the fact that it's actually a very tightly designed game is often forgotten.
Hmm.
Like it, and I think that this has inherited that sort of sense of, interleaving opportunity. Everything is balanced by another thing. Yeah, you can go out and execute somebody, but that means they will be out in a dangerous place, and you might better capitalize on that. But you better be banking on killing stuff in order to keep those free, those executions coming, and you're not guaranteed an execution from downing an enemy. So there's everything is pitted against, a very clarified, very distinct danger point, and it feels really sort of beautifully balanced on that point.
It feels a lot like I said, I didn't play much XCOM 2, but I played a lot of XCOM Enemy Unknown, and this Gears Tactics feels a lot more puzzly in its combat than XCOM did to me. Like, it does feel like you're trying to unpick people's Overwatch and work out how you can use your abilities in order to get this person over here an extra action point, so you can get this person over there out of trouble, and then turn the tide by pushing back against them. Did XCOM 1 or 2 do the thing of, because here, in order to interrupt someone's Overwatch mode, an enemy's Overwatch, other than just having Sid the Walrus yell at them, you have to use your pistol to do a disrupting shot. Like, just shooting them doesn't actually break their Overwatch. You have to use a specific skill. Does XCOM do that?
I can't remember, but I don't think just shooting them disrupted Overwatch. I think you had to, like, if you disorient them, it would, and if you, certain status effects would take it off. But usually in XCOM, the main way you do it is some characters just have an ability that makes them immune to it. So you just run them out there and trigger it. Like, they'll take the shot, but they won't hit, and it's only ever one shot. So as long as you can get them to spend it on something, then you've got rid of it.
Because I really like that it forces you to use your pistol in this situation, like that like pushing you to flank, pushing you to get into a position to be able to take the shot, and then using a specific skill makes it feel a lot more satisfying.
Yeah, it's actually, I hadn't really thought about this when playing, and I probably should have, but it's a good incentive to split up, right? You don't want all your people in the same group, because if an enemy gets Overwatch on all of you, none of you can do that pistol thing without themselves getting shot.
Yeah.
It's did you see that it was made by, I mean, it's made by the Coalition, which are the developers that basically took over the Gears series after Epic set it aside, but it's also made by Splash Damage.
I think Splash Damage actually really did make it.
Yeah, I think
the Coalition
they're the lead developers on it.
Yeah.
And like, it feels like probably Splash Damage's best game, like their first game that's not first game that's better than it is interesting. Because Splash Damage previously made Enemy Territory, Quick Wars, and Brink, and Dirty Bomb, and all of those games were interesting, but not necessarily always that much fun to play. Whereas this just feels really tight and satisfying.
Yeah.
Like, even aside
Is
from
this
the kind of... Go on.
Sorry, is this their first single player game?
Huh.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Can't think of another one. Oh, hang on, didn't they do some mobile game at one point, I think. I can't remember.
I'm finding that mission that I was talking about, I had that amazing phase where I was chaining everything together and getting the same number of actions. And then the turn after, I think, is where I'm where I am now, and I just had to stop playing because it was so overwhelming. They just like we were facing like 3 groups of enemies, and I've destroyed one of those groups, and I think half destroyed another, and maybe killed one guy from the third group. And then end turn, did really well there, and then it spawns like another group of enemies behind me, another 5 melee dudes, and then a spaceship flies by and drops off another squad, and another spaceship flies by and drops another squad, and then the hole that the first people came out of also spews out new enemies, and then a big thing comes up on screen saying reinforcements incoming. Like, that wasn't the reinforcements. And it just like, I know that there are all these mechanics that let me take out more people than I can in an XCOM game, and like I can grenade that group of 5 melee guys, and that will do them all. And stuff like that. But I just look at the number of elements I have to think about here and just get like fatigue. It's just, oh God, I don't know if I can face this right now.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's like, while XCOM puts the stress to the G-escape and the, between ones, and lets you be generally very, very kind of methodical in the tactical mode. In Gears, it wants you very much to be feeling very stressed and overwhelmed, when you're playing the tactics game. Like, that is its thing. I think that it wants you to feel like you're up against this horde. I felt, but for me, there's been the generated mission I went on is one where there are these 2 points that you've got to capture, and they're in different areas. So you'll need to. I had to divide up my 4-man team into these totally separate areas. Couldn't really support each other at all, and hold them by standing in the middle. And so far, I've found that standing in one place has not done me too many favors, especially when enemies could come from any direction. And I was nervous about going in, and I felt overwhelmed all the way through. But I survived and did well. And I think that's the sort of the flavor it wants to give you. Like, you're powerful, but the numbers are always against you.
Yeah, and those holes in the ground are nuts as well, because they'll spew out like 3 or 4 or 5 enemies every turn, but you can grenade them in order to close them. And so, like, you're super incentivized to send a person on that very first turn when you spot it to just run the heck over to it and immediately throw a grenade into it. Because if not, it's the difference between having to fight 3 enemies and having to fight 12 enemies.
They do so much on their first turn. Like, they can come out of that hole and run a whole screen's worth of real estate towards you and take a shot and then take cover. And that's just the turn they spawned on. Like, we didn't know they were even going to be here till then.
And also uses up a grenade, which is on a really long cooldown. Like, I think it's 3 or 4 turns, I think. And grenades are super powerful as well. So you kind of, I spend most of the game wanting them to be off cooldown.
I should say, like, although it doesn't have the geoscape stuff, it does have a lot of menus in between missions, because like on you get skill points, you pick up crates on the battlefield which have equipment in them, and then so you spend your time in between missions retooling your soldiers, like upgrading. There's a skill tree for passive skills and active skills, and there are like attachments and stuff for your weapons that give them better accuracy, better damage output. There's a lot of stats there. You can also customize your soldiers. So I gave Sid the Walrus a lovely pink checkered pattern on his machine gun. There's a lot of stuff to tinker around with in between the missions, which so there is still a macro level loop that you're getting from completing these missions to get new stuff to then outfit you and make your squad stronger. And the skill tree stuff seems like it's quite, like, there's some juicy looking stuff on there alongside just like percentage stat increases and that sort of stuff.
And I also believe that, like, each of the those skill trees, they're kind of divided into these 4 quadrants for each of the characters, and they apparently, I read, and this might be inaccurate, but I don't think that you will get beyond like level 6 or so. I think that's pretty much as far as you'll get by the end of the campaign, and that means that you won't be able to sort of cross specialize that much if you want to get the kind of like the end tree stuff in each of the different specializations for each of the characters, which actually, because it feels like you rush through getting stuff towards the start, because every level up you get something like 2 skill points. But yeah, I think you quickly feel that you're going to have to specialize as they get more back, like level up. I thought the menu system's terrible though.
Yeah. I feel like I haven't played it enough in order to condemn it, but I want to at this stage, because it doesn't lay out things particularly clearly, and it doesn't make it easy to compare stats between things. And like, I missed the first time through the menus that I had skill points to spend, or even that there was a skill tree. I just missed that completely until I went to start the next mission, and then it was like, oh, you've got skill points.
I went to the equipment screen because they told me to go there, and I did all the equipment stuff, and then I was looking for a character upgrade screen because I could see I'd been told they'd been promoted. So I was really searching through the tabs, like, is it equipment? Is it missions? Is it something else? And then I went to mission, and it didn't seem to be there either. And then I went back to equipment, and then when I went to equipment via that way, I did see a button for going up on your skills. But yeah, that seemed weirdly hidden.
Yeah, I think that the fact that it flags so strongly that people haven't got new equipment or have leveled up properly is a sort of after the fact. Oh dear, nobody can navigate this stuff very well.
I imagine it's going to get nightmarish as we get more soldiers. I feel like if we end up with 10 or 15 people.
Well, this is so that one of the things that I just latterly realized is that so you can recruit these randomly generated, I'm pretty sure they're just randomly generated soldiers, and they have equipment on them, and that equipment might be useful, but of course they're wearing it. So I found myself recruiting characters just to get their equipment, and then you have to strip it off them, go through all of those things. Then you have to, it was really painful. It was really painful.
In Chimera Squad, you'd call that a spec ops. Come to my office, take all your clothes off. That's your special operation.
But yeah, I was I've been enjoying it enormously. I think it's like I don't know whether it'll have long-term appeal. I wonder whether it's kind of really good for now, but it doesn't have anything more up its sleeve. Like, I think that's what you were kind of getting at with the kind of the between mission meta stuff, Graham. I don't know how much there is going on in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect I'll play it through once and then be done with it in, I don't know, however long it's going to take, 20, 30 hours or whatever. Whereas obviously people play XCOM for 200 hours and then just want to keep going. I'm assuming it's not going to be that kind of game. But I'm okay with that. Like, I'm less okay with the price, I think, because it's a £50 game, and that feels weird. But then at the same time, I can't criticize it for that too much, because I didn't buy it for £50. I spent £3 on Xbox Game Pass in order to get access to it.
I think also, I think its price is sort of somewhat like that. The idea of a £50 price for this, like, given its production values, is being massively skewed by the fact that Chimera at the moment Chimera Squad right now is very, very, very cheap, like extraordinarily cheap.
Yeah.
What have you been playing, Alex?
I've just been playing these games. It's been Tactics all the way down.
Tactic Fest.
Oh, and Animal Crossing, obviously. My daughter boxed me into my house by terraforming around it.
Is she the primary resident?
Yes, she is. She has extraordinary power, which we never voted on. So it's my daughter, my wife, and I playing, and she has sweeping powers that my wife and I don't know how she came into them and what we can do about it.
I think nothing. I think you're stuck. Like, I have loads of friends in this position where their kid was the first to play, and their kid is now the sole person who can make any progress at all or authorize anything. And in a lot of cases, their kid has lost interest in the game. So, can you please play some more Animal Crossing?
I mean, there have been lots of complaints about it, about Animal Crossing not supporting more than one island on a machine.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And but I couldn't. Obviously, lots of people have different circumstances and so on and so on and so on. For me, I couldn't imagine playing it other way. Like the fact that our island is extra alive because my wife will do stuff in an evening, and Hester will do something during the day, and then I'll discover what they've been up to and have them send stuff to me and see what they're doing. And like it's so special. I mean, it's been such a real joy to play over the last few weeks. It's just it's been a perfect tonic.
Awesome. I got into the whole turnip market, and it was tense for a while there. But once you know that the turnip exchange exists, that kind of takes the sting out of the risk element. So there's just a site you can go to, and just like people post their prices, and it's super competitive. If there's someone has a good price, you've got to like apply to be in the queue to visit their island, and it can take like an hour to get through that. And I've never used it, but because I know it's there, I know that if I invest all of my money in turnips on Sunday, and I haven't seen a good price from any of my friends by Friday, I'd probably go to crawling to the exchange and like, please take this off my hands. I'm in too deep. It hasn't come to that yet so far. And actually, there was one week where I had 250k in bells, and I sunk it all into turnips. Just give me all the turnips I can afford, because I'm sure I'll get a good price. And I did, like halfway through the week, and made I think 2 million off that. And then of course you're kind of sorted, because then next week 250k is about an inventory's worth of turnips. Like that's as many as you can carry. And so doing more than that is going to be a huge pain in the ass. It's going to be multiple trips to buy and multiple trips to sell. And if you're queuing up to join someone's island, having to do that twice just seems like hell to me. So I'm never really going to spend more than that on turnips. So the next week I have 2 million in the bank. I spend an eighth of it on turnips, and now I can make another 2 million off that if the price is good. But if I don't, I could throw it all away and I'll basically be fine. And probably not coincidentally, I have stopped playing Animal Crossing.
Oh no!
I had all these things I needed to solve. Like I'm trying to build this bridge because it would look really pretty going over this waterfall. I want to move my house so I can make this nice line of fruit trees that goes to it, because it's all misaligned at the moment. I want to pay for this person to move their house and upgrade this and buy this nice bit of furniture or whatever. And then I just did it all in 2 days after getting that money. And now I have nothing left to look forward to. And it's just like, well, I've achieved everything. I'm rich and it's all fine. And so I've kind of lost my impetus to play now. I'm probably playing wrong.
Yeah, I've made I've made a graph for the family turnip market prices. It has a sort of historical average. It's full graphs, 2 graphs, one for the week, one for the historical record. Yeah, it's totally useless, but it's really good. So we're kind of like checking twice a day. But last week on the turnip market, I managed to. I didn't realize what time it was. Like the price just plummeted. We bought it something like 80, and it ended up being at 40 on the Saturday. And then it got to 9:55. I didn't realize we were watching TV, and then the TV show ended. Check the time. Oh God, I've got 5 minutes to sell 5 minutes to sell the turnips. And so I logged in, and that was the day on which what happened? An advance had been made. Yeah, it was an upgrade of some sort. No, KK Slider was in town. Fucking KK Slider was in town. So I logged in, and it subjected me to his entire song with the credits. And I'm there, and I'm looking at the thing. Got 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, and he finally finishes. And then Hester had bought something, or done something that then Nook came up and told me about the island editor thing. So he was giving me a demo of that, and 30 seconds left. I stopped. I ran to the shop. It's closed. God damn it! This is just no, I've lost everything. This is like 100 grand worth of turnips.
What happens to the turnips? Spoil? Like I
They
don't.
Yep.
they spoil. But so I thought, okay, right. And it's in retrospect, it's stupid. I time traveled. I thought this is fair enough. It's not my fault that KK Slider did a concert for me when I did not pay for this. This is not. I don't want to go to your concert tonight, KK. I'm busy. I'll time travel. So I time traveled back 1 hour, but of course, the turnips were already spoiled because they'd been saved as spoiled in real time, and I lost the lot. I think I got like 1,000 bells for the rotten turnips. Oh man!
Oh,
So
you can
then
still sell the rotten turnips.
yeah, you can for sort of like a small fee. It's a small amount. But then, of course, I'm cleaned out. I've got no money. Oh, no, that was just stupid, though, actually. The reason I didn't know was just stupid because I then paid it into my house, assuming that I'd have a bunch of money, some money
Right.
from, yeah, and that's my Animal Crossing stock market story.
I love the image of like the KK Slider thing is that like everyone's been building up to that for months. It's a huge event
I know.
everyone's super excited about, and it's finally happening, and you're just like kicking in the Nook Twins door. Like, why aren't you fucking open? I hope you're all happy with your fucking concert. My turnips are ruined.
Yeah, that's exactly how it played out.
Shall we do questions from questions?
Hey, let's do that. First one comes from Noel Warford, who writes, "What are some good older games that might have been relegated to your Steam backlogs that would be worth pulling out again when staying at home? For me, Steam World Heist, Desktop Dungeons, and God help me, Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms have been fitting that bill nicely." Have you been finding yourselves playing anything old, you two?
Yeah, I went back to Kentucky Route Zero now that it's finally finished, and I think I'd stopped at episode 1. I think I stopped at the bears. There's some bears, and I stopped there. That might be maybe that's early in episode 2, or act 2, I should say. And I played through it all. I went through a lot of different platforms. I played it on Switch at first, and then I found that the text was just not comfortable to read in portable mode, at least. And then I didn't really get into it until I got a massive TV, because I just find the text really unpleasant to look at. It's white on black, so maximum contrast, but with a slightly uncomfortable font for me, at least. So it wasn't until it was like 55 inches big that I could comfortably read it. And then it's a gorgeous series of surreal images and just lovely scenes and beautifully staged things. And every time there's a song in it, like a proper song with singing, is just sublime. They're all really, really good and really well used, and just like create these perfect moments. I can't say I got much out of the story, and I also ended up feeling like I didn't want to be driving this game. I just felt like actually interacting with it was kind of only getting in the way. And I ended up for Act 5, I almost didn't play it. I was almost like, just kind of the amount of sort of effort to make this text appear as fast as I want it to, and to just progress through this stuff is too much for the very low-key enjoyment I'm getting. But I do want to see all the visuals, because just that was the best part for me. And so I just watched the last act on YouTube, which I know is sacrilege for the people who love Kentucky Route Zero, because you do choose, you don't make sort of branching choices, but you choose how you basically help write the narrative by choosing what is said. And often it's not things that your character is saying, you're actually deciding what happens by just picking a description of what happens. But I'd never really cared that much. It was always like, I'll just say this one, I guess. So I'm perfectly happy for someone else to make those choices. And actually, the person I watched, I think their name was Skipper on YouTube. And I'll get the link for the show notes. But I really enjoyed watching them play it, because they're way more into it than I was. And so kind of like I've talked about Christopher Odd in the past, who sort of gets more out of games than I do. And so it's great to watch him. This guy does too. And he was noticing, like, a symbol on the floor in Act 5 is a reference to a thing that happened in Act 1. And They're talking about the neighbors. I'd never heard that term before, but apparently I had, because it's been mentioned a bunch of times, and he remembers, but I don't. And yeah, he just made way more sense of it than I ever would. And also, he did all the interactive stuff, which I don't really care about. And I got to see some really beautiful moments from that act. I ended up kind of thinking I should have just watched this whole game on YouTube.
It's not the game that I like. I keep having grand ambitions. Basically, hey, it's lockdown. I'm gonna make more effort to play games with other people. I'm gonna play Hunt with Marsh, which we did once and then never again. I'm gonna play Sea of Thieves with people, which I've managed to do once and then never again. The only thing that's actually stuck on this, I'm a massive cliche, but it's Spelunky, the Spelunky Daily, which I haven't played Spelunky probably since I was last on the podcast, like properly 4 years ago or whatever. Like it just hasn't been a thing I've even had installed. But it's been really nice going back to the daily, and it turns out there are a couple of people that are still doing the daily every day. Paul Dean, games journalist, he still turns out still does the Spelunky daily every single day. He's just on the scoreboard.
Jonty does as well.
Yeah, Jonty's the other person I was going to say. He was the person who actually poked me about it and said that I should start doing it. And so it's been fun just competing with Jonty every day and getting roundly trounced in the leaderboard with Jonty every day.
My entire Steam collection is one just pile of shame, so I can't even focus on what I should do. Like, so I use the favorites thing to kind of put games into where I usually will then forget about them, even though they're at the top of the list, because I just sort of edit them out of my vision. But in that list right now, we have Sekiro, which I really did want to play more of, but only got as far as the big bad snake thing. And we've got Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I do spark up now and then. I'm only 30 hours in or something.
Nowhere.
Yep, I'm 28 hours in, which I know is nowhere. Yeah, last time I went in there, I noticed how much of the map I've visited, and I don't know. I just don't know what to think about it. And then there are all these kind of DLC packs, which I really want to experience, the Elysian Fields or whatever the hell they are. And I don't know whether I can ever see it because I'm only 28 hours in. But I have not managed to play any of these things because there's been cool new things to play instead. Thanks for that question, Noel. So here's another one from Nick Wheeler, who writes to us about Crysis with his memory jog, because Crysis remarkably is heading to the Switch. He remembers how back in the day the big question was always yes, but will it run Crysis? And he remembers the first time he played it, which was towards the end of the game, going to an aircraft carrier and meeting a character whose shirt was kind of suffering for some terrible graphics glitch. He says that where you'd expect to find a well-pressed uniform, instead a shifting kaleidoscope of graphical glitches met my eyes. For a moment, I believed that the Admiral had been caught out of uniform in the chaos, but then the mismatched colours of his garment began to swirl. This was not a garish Hawaiian shirt. It was some kind of Lovecraftian attire ironed by madness and adorned with the collar from outer space. The briefing continued with such military jargon, but I was transfixed by this weird, swirly, glitched shirt. He asks whether anyone else encounters that shirt or whether he's alone in that madness. I didn't get there. I imagine neither of you did. But then secondly asked, what's the most memorable glitch that you've ever encountered in the game that's had absolutely no impact on gameplay?
I had a thing with an Oblivion DLC. It was the Knights of the Nine, and you sort of became, as always in an Elder Scrolls game, you became their lord and god and led them into battle and stuff within about 5 minutes. But one of them, I wrote about this for PC Gamer at the time, but it was many, many years ago. A guy called Thedret had a glitch on my game where his arms just extended out horizontally, like he's in a T-pose. It wasn't quite a T-pose, though. Like, the rest of him was perfectly natural. He was just opening his arms up as if to say, I caught a fish this big. And he was just stuck like that throughout all dialogue and all combat. He would just always have his arms fully outstretched. And it looked completely absurd, but I became really attached to him because he was so... This is so like personal to me. Like, only I get this guy. And so if he ever died in combat, I would have to reload an earlier save because Fedrit the Exaggerator was the only thing I truly cared about in that world.
And he persisted between saves, between sessions. Wow, that's a good one. And he was perfectly capable in combat.
Yep, still worked.
I tend to find that the glitches are forever and definitely impact on the game itself. I don't have anything to say. So John writes, I was just listening to your podcast, and for reasons only my brain can answer to, but I spent a good 30 seconds or so pondering what the hell could be meant by unusual wind conditions in a game. Instantly, I was transported to DayZ with its unsettling environmental sounds that, while initially scary, eventually form a comforting background hum against which threats stand out. Imagine then, to my surprise, I tuned back in and found the question actually made sense and was thoroughly interesting to hear discussed. I think that he's referring to a discussion about wind conditions. Is that, I think?
As in victory conditions.
Yeah. I couldn't stop hearing wind condition for the rest of the recording, despite myself. So my question is this: what are the most unusual wind conditions you remember in a game? Well, I will also consider answers involving unusual wind conditions while playing games. Thanks for putting on, even in these trying times. You are helping.
There was one in Inside. I don't remember. There's a bit in Inside where you're sort of going between like protective cover, but anytime periodically there'll be this massive, like, is it a fan or something, or is it just like a sort of mystic honking blast? But some kind of wind type entity destroys anything that isn't shielded by some kind of cover.
Yeah, that was There's going back to Animal Crossing. I do remember the guy just on some days it's windy, and usually the trees are sort of ruffling gently, but on windy days they really move around. And while it's a bit exaggerated, it's just one of these little things that sort of, there aren't many things it can do with environmental conditions. Like, it can do rain and sort of non-sunny conditions. It can do sunny, and then it can do things like snow or autumn feeling or blossom and things. But that's quite a sort of a low dynamic range of wind weather conditions. But the wind kind of gives this sort of quite a sort of extra little dynamic feel to quite a limited set of things, which I kind of really enjoy. Graham, do you have anything to add here?
I have no wind anecdotes of unusual wind that I can think of.
Thanks for that question, John. Moving on to Kane, who has found diagnosing patients in Project Hospital is the most interesting investigation in a video game. And that's probably because illness is something we're all familiar with from real life. We know what symptoms like breathing difficulties, abdominal pain, and A1AT deficiency. I don't know what that means, but okay. And when we see a patient with a chest pain, we don't need the game to help us make the deduction. I wonder if this could be a heart problem, because we know the chest is where the heart be at. Crime and deceit are also familiar to us, which is why all the other good investigations in games are about murders and conspiracies. We know what it means to find fingerprints on a gun or to catch a suspect in a lie. Are there any things other than crime or medicine that could make for a good investigation system in a video game?
I had a thought with this, which was I would like a game in which you come along after car crashes and Or after physics disasters of any kind, like plane
Yeah.
crashes or building collapses, where you have to, because a lot of physics systems can be deterministic, there should be possible to, you know, have a building, say, where there are certain struts that bombs have been placed on to cause that building to collapse. I want to come along and either try and diagnose, well, why did this building collapse? What structural problems caused it to collapse? Was it a bomb? Was it something else? Or be like someone working for an insurance company that comes along after after a crash from one of the burnout games and tries to work out, well, who exactly was at fault for this particular crash? Was it the driver of the black car? Who was driving too fast? Who tried to change lanes and when?
I mean, that is
Yeah.
in concept, but not in execution. That's the premise of Obra Dinn, right? You're an insurance investigator, and it's your job to decide. It's not just solving murders. It's your ultimate goal is to assign culpability. Like, which of these deaths is the East India Company's fault, and which ones were the person's own fault for getting themselves killed.
I didn't realize that actually. I knew that Obra Dinn was like an investigation into all these deaths aboard a boat, but I didn't realize you were an insurance person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything you were talking about with where actually you're trying to reverse engineer like physics stuff, because that could be really interesting.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be such a good game.
I had an idea. This is still in the realm of crime, which I know Kane already mentioned, but I was thinking it actually inspired by Animal Crossing turnips, because people like you, Alex, people are making graphs of their turnip prices, and there's also a site where you can plug these numbers in, and it will predict what you might be on track for the rest of the week. And the reason it can do that is there are only a fixed number of profiles your turnip prices can follow in a given week. There's one called declining, which means it's only ever going to get worse. There's one called small spike, which means on Thursday or Wednesday it's going to go up by X amount and then go down after that. It'll go up like twice and then go down. And then the big spike means it will go up 3 times and then it'll go down. And given the prices during the week, it can't tell you for sure because there is variance within them. It's not like it's always 125 on day 2. There's always a range. But as you get more information, it can narrow that down and it can rule out, okay, you're definitely not in a declining pattern. You're definitely not in a small spike pattern. So you might be in a big spike pattern or you might be in this other one. And so it'll give you a percentage chance of which thing you're in given the prices you've seen. And that's obviously, that's kind of interesting in itself, but it's a bit of a weird abstract thing. It's only because of the game is coded that way that you can do this. But it made me think, I would love a game where I am trying to profile an AI. I think maybe in like an RTS type context, so maybe this isn't a crime thing. But I would love to be playing against an AI and look at their moves and think, all right, given that they've gone for that control point and they didn't defend this one and they seem to be going this, there's only 2 different AI profiles it could be. It's either greedy or it's turtling. And if it's turtling, I know what their next move is going to be. So I'll test them out. I'll see like, if I attack here, do they build a turret? And if they build a turret, I know, okay, for sure it's turtling. And now that I know their AI profile, I can predict them and like get the better of them. I think something like that would be kind of cool, where like the limitations of the AI are something the game is not hiding from and not trying to disguise. It's saying like, okay, our AIs are limited, but there's 10 of them, and you've got to figure out which one we're using in this particular scenario. And once you do, then you can really beat it.
Final question actually is quite neatly, it goes back to the nips. This is from C. Retling, who writes to us to say, hi, I hope you and your listeners are well. I offer as a tribute a question. What games have mechanics that keep the user inside the intended game loop? Mechanics that say, I know you might want to exploit the system, but here's an incentive for you to humor the system. And he brings up a case study, a very pertinent one. You're recently playing Animal Crossing New Horizons. I often play late at night when the shops are closed. Same as me. It's very annoying. I finally decided to use time travel. He writes, I found there to be no huge disadvantage to time travel outside of a small daily bonus to the Mars currency. It was wonderful. Like playing a Minecraft creative server, I could play on my own terms at my own pace. Then I bought some turnips to try and get that nip money. I quickly realized how the turnip market keeps timetable in check. Going past a Sunday makes the turnips rot. Going back in time makes the turnips rot. So maybe actually my when my turnips rot, this is Alex speaking, not Steve. Maybe that's why it wasn't simply because they turned over in my actual real time, is that could I actually turn the time. Anyway, the turnips and the daily miles bonus are very effective tools to keep the exploits at bay. What other examples from games are this? What other examples from games are this? Perhaps this is a common feature in many games, especially in online ones, or perhaps this is a notable example because of its diegetic quality.
It's just making me realize that. Sorry, this just made me realize that I was talking about the funny image of you kicking in the Nook stores and then yelling at the concert. The fact that you then travelled back in time and arrived with an armful of rotting turnips is even funnier. No, I'm too late. I'm too late.
I've come from the future. I bear rotten turnips.
The turnips are rotten in every timeline.
It's your nips, Marty. Something's got to be done about your nips.
This doesn't feel like exactly what the questioner is asking for, but it did remind me of a thing of anti-exploits, and the one that always made me laugh was the one in Half-Life 2 where they realized speedrunners were going too fast by bunny hopping. So every time you jump, if you were already going pretty fast, there's some way it would sort of endlessly accelerate you. So as long as you kept bunny hopping correctly, you'd keep gaining speed. And the way they tried to solve that was to add a little bit of a backward force on you when you land to counteract that. And then speedrunners realized they could just turn around 180. And then now this thing that was supposed to stop them from going so fast would actually accelerate them. Because as long as you're not facing the way you're going, it will make you go in that direction even faster.
Yeah, that's such a good one. That's led to all kinds of kind of issues and sort of weirdnesses with the engine ever since for games like which have inherited parts of its sort of, like, I don't know, was there something about Titanfall because it was built fundamentally on Source that it had to get around that these things in some way? I vaguely remember because they were just coded so deeply into the game. I just thought of another example, also from Animal Crossing, but the earlier ones. There's a character called Mr. Rossetti, who is a very angry mole, who would, if you didn't save your game in the last session, he'd pop up outside your house when you came out of it and just berate you with this incredibly long dialogue where he would just tell you off for what you did and threaten that he'd take away the game, threaten that nothing would work. He would keep you talking. His purpose was basically to annoy you by just not stopping talking and worrying you slightly. At some point, you would know that it was all empty threats, but the real punishment was the fact that he would just go on and on and on, because at that point, presumably when you loaded a save, it would put a little check on your existing save to say a new game has been started, but it wouldn't. But the save process was quite long, and you'd have to do it at the end of every session, and like it would be enacted by you'd have to go to bed, and that would be the thing that initiated the end of your game. And that process was long and tedious. But also, if you did something and you wanted to go back on it, or maybe Turnip Market did exist in that on the GameCube version, I think. Certainly in later ones where the sleep system and Mr. Rossetti were around, you would, if something was up and you didn't want to save because the time was wrong and you wanted to go back in time, and so the game wouldn't know about it, Mr. Rossetti was there to stop you. So like I think
was his name Mr. Rossetti because he was about resetting the game?
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly why.
I like that as like it's almost a much more pleasant version of some of the the piracy protections you get in some games. So like there was a Serious Sam game where if you downloaded a pirated copy of it, they dropped an infinitely quick invincible scorpion into the game with you. They would just like chase the player around and like do damage to you at all times, and so you can advance. But there was also this is a really terrible way of trying to stop exploits. But the Football Manager series, where I'm a filthy save scummer in Championship Manager and Football Manager. but at some point during that series history, they started trying to clamp down on that stuff by making it harder for you to quit the game without saving. But then what they did after that was they introduced cheats, which you had to pay real money to activate. And so, like, if the player gets injured in your game, you can pay like £1 of real money for a magic sponge in order to instantly heal that player. And like, that's just microtransactional hell. And eventually they eased up, I think, a bit on like trying to stop people from save scumming, so you can still do it. But there was a brief period of like 2 or 3 years, I think, where it was like they're on the one hand trying to stop you from cheating the usual ways, and then on the other hand trying to charge you money so you could cheat.
Oh, there's kind of anti-cheat stuff as well, where, like, what is it, the Talus principle? If you're a cheat, there's an elevator that it just traps. It goes halfway up to a point. I don't know what point this is in the game, presumably fairly early on, or like a chunk into the game, and is elevated, and it locks you in if you've got a pirated one, and you can't get out, and you're stuck there, sort of looking out over the world and unable to get out. There's quite a lot of examples of those sorts of things.
Yeah, the most sort of delicious one I heard of was, I think it's Game Dev Story, where you're trying to run a game developer and trying to, you decide some basic defining features of your game, and then you're told how well it sells and stuff. But they leaked a pirated version of their own game where if it detected you were playing the pirated version, your games would always bomb financially because too many people were pirating them.
That's awesome. The Talos principle is made by the same people as Serious Sam, so maybe Crow Team are just really, really good at fucking with people who pirate the games.
And that's all the questions we have for this week. It remains for me to say you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/CreightonCrowbar.
I'm sorry.
You can follow us. You can listen to our pods and enjoy some other extra content that we have made over the years on our YouTube channel, which is at Creighton Crowbar. You can visit us online at our website, which is CreightonCrowbar.com. Thanks to our Patreon sponsors who make a lot of what we do on this pod possible. Thanks so much. You can find out about sponsoring yourself at patreon.com/Creighton Crowbar. And those are all the formalities, I think.
You can also join our Discord community. Well, there's a
Thank
link
you,
at CreightonCrowbar.com. And if you want to send us your own questions, you can do so at questions@CreightonCrowbar.com.
And you can also follow us on Twitter individually. I am at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
I am at Gonas, GONNAS.
And I am Rotational, ROTATANO. Oh, I don't even know.
No.
No.
It's how the word is spelled.
Regardless, thanks for listening,
everybody.
everybody.